Alright guys, I've been working on a Honda Foreman slash Rubicon 500. You don't find many of these online as far as if you're looking on forums. I've had a problem with gas leaking out of the drain tube on the bottom side of the carburetor. I pulled the carburetor off and replaced the float needle. Went to Honda and bought a new float needle, and the old float needle looked like this. And I would suggest, if you have one like this that you're having problems with, replace it. As you notice, the tip part of this doesn't have a rubber seat on it. It's polished metal. Now these might have worked in the past, but if these build a groove around it, as do the rubber ones, they won't seat inside the brass housing that float needle resides in, and it'll cause fuel to leak down into the bottom side of the drain tube, which on the bottom side of the carburetor is that piece right there. Now on the back side of the Fuller, if you'll look, this is the drain tube. Sorry, I'm trying to work on this at night. If you're like me, you work on your toys of an evening after you get home from a normal day's work. This is the bottom side of the drain tube, and this was leaking fuel out onto the ground. Now I've replaced the float needle inside the carburetor and noticed that I had condensation built up to about where my thumbnail is after replacing it. Now don't be confused if you think it's still leaking after you replace the float needle itself. Temperature and how much this tube has had gasoline on it has a tendency to build up gas vapors when it comes out of here, because your carburetor has to vent the vapors from inside the float, or inside the float bolt, or inside the carburetor itself. And depending on how much this tube has been, saturated with gas, will determine how much of the vapor goes up this tube. So what I've done is, once you change the float, turn your petcock off on your gas tank, which is right here, and on the 500 it will set horizontal like so. This will keep any gas from going down this hose into the carburetor and keep anything from leaking out. That should dry out that hose that's on the bottom side of your float bowl. When I got home this afternoon, because I looked last night and it had that condensation built up on it, I got home this afternoon and turned it back onto the on position, which is straight down. This allows fuel to go down this line into your carburetor. And as you see, now I had quite a bit of condensation built up on the bottom side of this drain tube yesterday evening. And when I got home this afternoon, you can see that it's dry. Now, that was my fix as far as changing the float needle. If it's still dripping, you'll see on the bottom side, it doesn't take long for this tube to start dripping gas. you possibly have a couple issues. You may have varnish built up, depending on if you leave gas on your carburetor all the time. You'll have varnish built up on the inside of your carburetor that will cause that float to stick. Now, you've seen some people maybe possibly tap on the bottom side of the bowl part to cause that float to unstick. It's a good idea to, when you get done riding your four-wheeler, now just say for the weekend or for a long period of time, turn this into the off position, let it idle until it runs out of gas. That should clear any gas that may be residing inside of your carburetor, and that should keep your float and all of your carburetor pieces from getting too much varnish built up on them over a long period of time. Now, I've got multiple four-wheelers and motorcycles that I have left the petcock in the on position and have had to clean the carburetors and the jets and other items inside the carburetor because they built up varnish over time. And usually this happens on times when you don't ride it so much and sets up for a long period of time. But I would highly suggest that you turn the petcock in the off position when you're not riding it for a long period of time. That should keep most of your components inside your carburetor clean and running efficiently. So I hope this video helped, and at a later date I'll show you how to rebuild the carburetor.